They said it would never happen, that America would never push the red line for Israel, that Iran would never provoke the world to this edge. But then came the silence, the kind that only comes before a storm. What followed was a decision that shook every capital from Tehran to Washington. America wasn't just watching anymore, it was stepping into the fire. It began in shadows, quiet intelligence meetings, coded messages, satellite feeds watching every Iranian movement. Israel's defense grid was buzzing. Iranian drones, missiles, and cyberattacks had become daily routine. And yet something had changed. This time, Israel's response wasn't reactive. It was strategic. It was preparing for something far greater. And America knew it. Inside the Pentagon, a special room lit up with activity. Iran had crossed a line no one could ignore, targeting American assets through proxies, funneling weapons to Hezbollah and the Houthis, even launching precision strikes near US bases in Iraq. But that wasn't the final straw. The final straw came when an Israeli intelligence briefing made it to Washington, complete with satellite imagery, intercepted communications, and a chilling conclusion. Iran was weeks away from assembling a battlefield-ready nuclear device. That changed everything. President Daniels, long pressured to stay out, stared across the Oval Office. If Israel falls, he said, the whole Middle East burns. Overnight, American ships began moving into position. The USS George H.W. Bush carrier strike groups sailed toward the Gulf. B-2 bombers were stationed closer to the region, and elite special operations teams began deploying quietly to undisclosed Israeli air bases. The world watched and held its breath. The first sign came through Israeli media leaks. America had supplied Israel with bunker-busting munitions capable of striking Iran's heavily fortified nuclear sites. Then came something bigger. Satellite images revealed US Air Force refueling tankers flying in formation with Israeli fighter jets. The message was clear. This wasn't just support. It was partnership in war. On the ground in Tehran, Supreme Leader Khamenei held emergency meetings. His generals warned of a multi-front war, not just against Israel, but potentially against the United States, Britain, and Gulf allies. Meanwhile, Israeli missiles struck a Revolutionary Guard base in western Iran. Iran responded with a barrage of Shahab-3 missiles into Tel Aviv and Haifa. The Iron Dome intercepted many, but not all. That's when President Daniels addressed the nation. His voice was calm, but firm. Iran's aggressive actions, he said, have now directly threatened the security of our allies, our forces, and the global order. The United States will act, not for conquest, but for stability. It was official. America was in. Air bases in Qatar, the UAE, and Bahrain lit up with coordinated sorties. Stealth jets began targeting Iranian radar systems, missile batteries, and naval infrastructure. The Strait of Hormuz, lifeline to global oil, became a war zone. Global markets crashed. Oil prices soared, but the most dramatic shift wasn't military. It was geopolitical. China condemned the attacks. Russia warned of grave consequences. But behind closed doors, both knew something else. Iran had gambled, and America had called the bluff. Inside Iran, anti-aircraft batteries screamed through the skies. Cities went dark as blackouts rolled across Tabriz, Isfahan, and Mashhad. Iran's leadership went underground, but the people, millions of them, took to the streets. Some shouted in defiance of America. Ha! Others, tired of years of sanctions and repression, shouted against their own regime. In Tel Aviv, sirens never stopped. Children huddled in shelters. Soldiers kissed their families goodbye. This wasn't just Israel's war anymore. It was a global turning point. And in Washington, a new war cabinet formed. Advisors debated escalation, humanitarian corridors, cyber warfare, and post-strike diplomacy. But for the troops already flying above Iran, those debates were far behind them. They had one mission: end Iran's nuclear ambition, no matter the cost. America had chosen a side, and the world would never be the same again. The world's flashpoints had suddenly converged. While Israeli jets dove into Iranian airspace under American radar cover, cyber units in Virginia launched coordinated attacks on Iran's command and control infrastructure. Screens inside Tehran's military headquarters went black. Communications jammed. Missiles failed mid-air. For a few terrifying hours, Iran's high command was blind. And that was exactly how the Allies wanted it. Israel, flying with US links and intelligence support, struck Natanz, the symbolic heart of Iran's nuclear development. Deep underground, it was supposed to be untouchable. But American bunker busters changed that. The earth shook. The glow from the explosion was visible from miles away. What had taken Iran decades to build was reduced to craters in a single night. Iran retaliated immediately. Over 200 ballistic missiles launched toward Israel and US bases across Iraq and Syria. Multiple drones targeted the Fifth Fleet stationed in Bahrain. While most were intercepted, a few struck their targets. In Baghdad, sirens howled as an American installation took a direct hit. Casualties were reported. Videos of burning wreckage went viral. Anger swept through American media. Protesters gathered. Some called for restraint, but others demanded revenge. Inside the Situation Room, the atmosphere was tense. The Secretary of Defense leaned in, voice low and sharp. "They're dragging us deeper. We need to hit their nerve center. Take out the Quds Force Command." The President nodded. Operation Scorpion was launched. Elite joint US-Israeli special forces parachuted near the Iran-Iraq border. Their mission: eliminate Iran's forward operating intelligence network and, if possible, capture senior Quds Force leaders alive. It was daring, it was risky, but it worked. In a rare moment, American and Israeli troops stood together, rifles aimed, hearts pounding, inside Iranian territory. Meanwhile, the propaganda war had ignited. Iranian state media showed mass funerals, crying families, and burning American flags. They called the war an imperialist invasion, a holy war. Ayatollahs urged martyrdom. But inside Iran's underground social media networks, a different voice was rising. Young Iranians uploaded videos, calling out the regime's failures, demanding change, screaming for peace. In Israel, the mood was equally divided. While some celebrated the destruction of Iran's nuclear sites, others questioned the price. Tel Aviv's skyline was lit with explosions. Hospitals overflowed. Reservists left classrooms, homes, offices, marching to war. The nation was united, but weary. In Europe, chaos reigned. NATO was split. France called for ceasefire talks. Germany offered to mediate. The UK pledged support to America and Israel. Turkey accused the West of destabilizing the region. In the UN, ambassadors shouted. No resolution passed. It was diplomacy's darkest hour. In the heart of it all, Iran activated its network of regional allies. Hezbollah launched rockets into northern Israel. Hamas fired from Gaza. The Houthis targeted Saudi oil refineries. Iran's influence stretched like a web across the Middle East. And now, every strand was vibrating with fury. Saudi Arabia, Begati's long quiet, suddenly joined the conflict, not out of loyalty to the West, but out of fear. They knew. If Iran emerged stronger, they were next. Their jets joined the American-Israeli coalition. Their ports became military hubs. The Gulf was officially on fire. Back in America, the media war reached its boiling point. Headlines screamed betrayal or bravery. America at war again. Is supporting democracy or fueling destruction? Israel's war is now ours. On the streets, protests erupted in Washington, New York, Los Angeles. Some burned Israeli flags. Others held up posters of captured American soldiers. Families wept on live television. And yet, military enlistment surged. Patriotism, fear, rage, they all mixed into a storm. But beneath the noise, a deeper question echoed. What was the real objective? Was it to dismantle Iran's nuclear threat, protect Israel's security, defend American assets? Or was this war, like so many before, about control, power, and oil? As analysts debated, the battlefield expanded. Iranian ships attempted to blockade the Strait of Hormuz. Oil tankers exploded. The global economy reeled. Crude prices doubled overnight. Stock markets plummeted. Energy giants begged for intervention. The world wasn't just watching the war, it was paying for it. At sea, the US Navy launched its heaviest response yet. Tomahawk missiles rained down on Bandar Abbas, Iran's key naval base. Explosions rocked the Persian Gulf. Iranian submarines were sunk. Mines were cleared. For a brief moment, the sea belonged to the coalition. And yet, Tehran remained defiant. Supreme Leader Khamenei appeared on national TV, flanked by generals. His voice was steady. We will never surrender to Zionist and American aggression. Martyrdom is our strength. Victory is our destiny. But behind closed doors, his regime was fracturing. The Revolutionary Guard accused the regular army of incompetence. Political infighting soared. Protesters flooded Iranian cities, not in support, but in fury. They blamed their leaders for bringing ruin. They begged for water, food, peace. The regime responded with bullets, Dozens killed, hundreds arrested. Still, the resistance grew. And somewhere deep in the chaos, intelligence officers in Washington picked up a signal, a whisper of a possible coup. Iran wasn't just fighting the West, it was fighting itself. The war had taken a new, unexpected turn. While bombs exploded and cities burned, the real battle was now taking place in hushed conversations, encrypted calls, and backroom alliances. Inside Iran, the fractures within the ruling elite had deepened. The Revolutionary Guard was furious, not at America, but at their own government's failures. Generals once loyal to the supreme leader were suddenly disappearing. Some were fleeing, some were vanishing, and some were making deals. American intelligence intercepted a shocking signal. A high-ranking commander from Iran's elite Quds force had reached out to an intermediary in the United Arab Emirates. The message was clear. The regime is collapsing from within. We are ready to talk. It wasn't just a military war now. It was political, psychological, strategic. Washington moved fast. The CIA activated dormant contacts, while Mossad tightened surveillance on key Iranian figures. Inside Tehran, the regime grew paranoid. They shut down the internet, rounded up journalists, executed suspected spies. But the damage was done. The world knew Iran was bleeding, not just from bombs, but from the inside out. In the skies, the war raged on. US B-2 bombers, flying with Israeli escorts, struck Iranian missile facilities near Shiraz and Esfahan. In retaliation, Iran fired swarms of drones toward US bases in Kuwait and Jordan. Some made it through. Casualties were reported, hospitals filled, blood stained the desert sands. The American public, already on edge, was shaken. President Daniels gave another address. Our mission is clear. Our resolve is firm. We do not seek occupation, but we will not allow a regime of terror to threaten global peace. His words calmed some, infuriated others. Protests erupted again. The anti-war movement grew louder, but so did national pride. Families of soldiers went on television. Veterans pledged their support. American flags flew high. The nation was split, but committed. In Israel, the pressure was mounting. Entire neighborhoods in Haifa were reduced to rubble. Hezbollah's rockets from Lisbon, Lebanon grew deadlier. Children slept underground. But even in despair, the Israeli government stood firm. We have no choice, Prime Minister Eliav said. It is either us or them. That same night, a massive cyber attack crippled Iranian infrastructure. Power went out in Tehran. Oil pipelines exploded in Khuzestan. Communications were jammed. Iran's elite realized this wasn't just war from the sky, it was war from within. Their secrets were no longer safe. Their people were no longer loyal. And then came the unthinkable. A group of Iranian military officers, unknown, faceless, but powerful, released a statement over hijacked state television. They demanded the resignation of the supreme leader. They called for a transitional government, for peace, for survival. It was a coup attempt. The regime responded with brutal force. Tanks rolled into the streets. Helicopters patrolled the skies. Blood ran in Tehran again, not from American bombs, but from Iranian hands. Soldiers fought each other in the shadows of their capital. For the West, it was a dangerous opportunity. Inside NATO command, generals debated, support the rebellion covertly or stay hands-off and let Iran implode. The CIA voted for infiltration. Mossad had already infiltrated the rebel factions. Everyone wanted to control the outcome, because if Iran fell, a new power vacuum would open, and the wrong hands could take hold. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states doubled their support. They sent drones, intelligence, even special forces. They weren't doing it for America or Israel. They were doing it to keep Iran from rising again. The war had become a regional reckoning. In Iraq, militias funded by Iran turned against their handlers. Cities like Basra and Najaf saw riots. In Syria, Iranian troops began withdrawing. Assad was panicking. His survival depended on Iran, and now Iran was burning. Russia watched from the shadows, unwilling to intervene, but unwilling to lose influence. Putin sent ships near the Caspian Sea, not to fight, to remind the world he was still watching. China called for peace, but quietly bought up discounted Iranian oil through black market routes. They condemned the war, yet profited from it. Back in Tehran, the battle for control intensified. Loyalist forces bombarded neighborhoods suspected of housing rebels. The truth was far more brutal. It was a war of desperation. And yet, amid the chaos, hope flickered. A coalition of Iranian students, exiled journalists, and former military commanders began forming a transitional plan. They released a manifesto, a new Iran, free from tyranny, free from war. It gained traction. Even Western governments took notice. In Tel Aviv, for the first time in weeks, there was cautious optimism. If the Iranian regime fell, perhaps peace could be negotiated. Perhaps the nightmare could end, but not yet, because Iran still had one last move. Deep in the Zagros Mountains, in a hidden facility once thought decommissioned, Iran had prepared a final retaliation plan, a Zolfaghar Protocol. A scorched earth policy. It included mass missile strikes, sabotage and chemical stockpiles. If the regime fell, they would ensure their enemies burned with them. Western intelligence learned of it too late. The countdown had begun. In the ashes of war, flags still flew, speeches still echoed, but beneath them all lay a single undeniable truth. No one truly won, and the world would never be the same again.